Right, I'm going to make a gentle start. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Simon Kay. I'm the policy director for the think tank Reform. No relation with anything else called Reform that you may or may not have heard of that might be in the news right now or anything like that. Just the 20-plus-year-old think tank that goes by the name Reform. Welcome back for another in our flagship series, Meetings with Mayors. In just a moment, we're going to begin our big conversation with our special guest today, the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire, David Skaith. Just before that, a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of a description of what we're doing here today. So as policy director at Reform the Think Tank, I lead a major program called Reimagining the Local State. That's our project to explore devolution, local government reform, communities policy across the whole of England. We run events, we produce reports, we do analysis, all of which builds up a case for quite radical change to how that system works, starting from the changes needed in central government, and which is designed around the idea that we need to question some of those unquestioned assumptions that underpin how our system works. Now, within Reimagining the Local State, Meetings with Mayors is, as I said, our flagship series. And our ambition with this series is to host a conversation with every regional mayor in England, even as that list gets longer. Why? Because directly elected regional mayors are just a fundamentally different species. I don't. Do you mind being called a different species,
That's fine.
David? Okay, fine. If you think of the English political system as a bit of an ecosystem, this is a new addition to that ecosystem with the ability to disrupt. Directly elected mayors have the ability to adapt to their localities in a way that other kinds of politicians can't. They can disrupt the status quo, they can transcend, in some cases, their party politics, all while operating with something really, really unusual in our system, a direct electoral mandate from the public. So with this series, we're going to go place by place, mayor by mayor. We're going to explore the implications of this new model, the challenges and the tough decisions that emerge from it sometimes, and what these mayors themselves think might be the prospects for the future. So if you're listening to me right now, you're part of the live audience for today's event. We're also going to be sharing it online as a video and hopefully as a podcast too in the near future. If you're with us live, please do use the Q&A function. It's at the bottom of your screen here. Here in Zoom to share any questions that occur to you, and we will come to those in the second half. I'll weave them into the conversation as best I can. Now, as I said, for today's conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by David Skaith, who is, of course, the Mayor for York and North Yorkshire. David, welcome to Meetings with Mayors.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start by really asking you about yourself a little bit. You've had something, is it fair to say, of a meteoric rise to become the person and get the position that you're in now. We're approaching the first anniversary of your time as mayor in York and North Yorkshire. So what made you want to become a mayor? What made you want to become mayor of the patch you're in specifically? And is it fair to say that you're something of a political outsider?
Yeah, so it's a year on Friday that I was elected. I can't believe it's been a year, quite frankly. It has absolutely flown by. Yeah, you're right. I am from the region. I was born in Harrogate, raised here, grew up here all my life, came to university over in York, and I've pretty much lived here ever since, really. I've got a young family here who I've born and raised here, and we want to stay here a long time. My older brother is a police officer in North Yorkshire. My wife was a teacher here for over 13 years as well. So we're really sort of ingrained in the area, in the community. And really my want to get into this kind of role, really, and politics in general, was kind of born out of anger, really, and quite frankly, and a lot of frustration. I'd owned a small business for nearly 10 years on the high street, and I'd seen the impact that small businesses had faced, particularly on the high street, and how a lot of our towns and cities had really been sort of hollowed out, particularly over COVID, which I know was obviously no one's fault per se, but kind of is a really challenging times. There wasn't enough emphasis on high streets, but not only the businesses, but that community sense, places where people go and enjoy and socialize. So I've really, sort of tired of that, really. And as I say, my older brother is a police officer, and I've seen the cuts to frontline services that he'd faced and his team had faced. And my wife being in education for 13 years, and the cuts to education and to teaching and to classroom numbers, and yet not having the resources there to support the sector. And my mum was waiting on an NHS waiting list for nearly 3 years for an appointment, and it was just all those kind of things. You go, okay, I can I can sit around and complain. I can send a tweet and have a moan, or you can put yourself in an environment to actually make a change and make a difference. And I think coming at it from a non-traditional political side of things, owning a small business, wanting to really be passionate about my region, seeing the potential here that it has, and meeting with a couple of the much more longer term elected mayors that I did before I came into office. They very much saw mayors were not that kind of traditional politician like an MP. You're much more like a chief executive. Stakeholder engagement is a big part of it, bringing people together, making sure you're getting the right people around the table, really seeing that bigger, wider picture. So I think not being a politician, I think as a mayor probably helps in some aspects. Certainly doesn't help in all aspects. I think, you know, understanding how the inner workings of number 10 works would be a lot more helpful, which is why I've got a really good team around me. But I think really it does lend itself to being quite a different role to being a traditional MP. But it has been quite a meteoric rise in your words there. I didn't expect to be in the position when I sort of first put myself forward to do the role, but I think stars aligned at the time. I'm not going to lie, many people didn't think a Labour mayor would win in Conservative North Yorkshire, but I think politically at the time you need to remember where we were, where the Conservatives were nationally. But I think also that being of the area and being very passionate about the area and the community really borns through. Kind of people really buy into that and can really understand that. And I've sort of put that front and center. Everything I do is about healthy, thriving communities and putting people at the center and the heart of everything we do. It's not always about economic growth and that big picture. It's really understanding the fundamental challenges of your region and really going after those and really trying to make that sustained difference in those key areas.
It's so interesting, and there is something different about a model that enables someone who a business owner, someone who's established in their community, someone who represents that community because they came from it. There's something quite particular about a model that enables that rise to happen and to create a very different kind of authority. Because as I sort of, I mean, I said it in the intro, the people occupying these directly elected mayoral positions, they have that direct mandate like almost no one has. So there's something interesting going on there, isn't there? And I'm interested in one thing, which is, given your background as a business owner, as a resident, you probably have opinions about local government. Now, one thing that our first guest on Meetings with Mayors, Claire Ward, said was that she didn't really think of herself as being part of local government. Now that she's a mayor, she didn't really see combined authorities as being a bit of local government. I was quite struck by that. Do you think of yourself as being a part of local government, or do you think of yourself as being something different? And what are you if you're not?
Without sounding too much like a politician, I probably see myself being a bit of both actually, because we've only got
Right.
two local authorities in our patch, York and North Yorkshire. We engage a lot with both authorities because we've only got two to sort of deal with. So our combined authority is made up leader and deputy leader from both. So there's essentially five of us who are steering the ship. Now, obviously, I'm figurehead, I'm the mayor. It's kind of it does rest on me, but we have a huge amount of engagement with both authorities because we've only got two and we can. And quite frankly, we want to, we need to, because we want our combined authority to very much work from the ground up and work with what our residents and our people need. North Yorkshire went through a huge restructure before I came in place, where it went from all the different districts into one authority. So they've gone through a whole rebuild and restructure in themselves. So they're still kind of learning the ropes. But I think from my perspective, yes, we are a separate entity, and that needs to be made clear that what we're responsible for and what we deliver on is separate to what the local authority is doing. And that's difficult. I understand residents don't always understand the difference between a local council, the local MP, the council, the parish council, the mayor. There's so many different levels in there. So I think it's important that we do separate ourselves and have our own unique identities and areas of working. But for me particularly, because we're only made up of two, it's really important that we do have those really strong links with our local authorities. And politically, it's important as well, because we have York Labour and North Yorkshire Conservative. And, on the face of it, you would think there's a lot of combativeness there. But actually, when you make it about the place and the people you're representing, those politics do get parked very quickly, because we're all in it together. We understand working collectively well for the people of our region and having that sign of working together to government. They're going to see that we're a polished, functioning authority that can actually work closely and well, and has good structure in place, so we can get that funding and resources into our area. We're not seeing an area that's bickering and fighting, that's not getting on. So I probably see a little bit of both, and maybe it's because, as we touched at the start, maybe because we are a little bit smaller and we are reliant on those resources in both authorities as well. We probably do see ourselves as part of it, but in the same approach, we do have very different responsibilities and areas that we're focused on.
So, I mean, you've raised it there, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask the cheeky question, which is, York and North Yorkshire, I think geographically speaking, it's a very large bit of land, isn't it? I mean, you'd struggle to kind of encompass it. It's quite a diverse place, and I'm sure we'll talk about that as well. Demographically, it's quite diverse in terms of the kinds of economy that play out in different bits of it. But it's also got a fairly small population. I think it might be the second smallest of all the combined authorities as they currently stand. Is that too small for some of the things you want to achieve as a mayor? I mean, we're supposed to be talking more about strategic authorities now. You smaller than 1 million people? Is that a strategic footprint for an organisation?
Yeah, I feel it is. In terms of our geography, yes, we are ginormous. Quite frankly, it is huge, and I think we need to remember that a mayor and devolution can't be just born out of a core city, because it's the same places that are getting the same funding and responsibility and powers, and we need to show that devolution can work for everywhere and for everyone. And I think you look at us, we are the first mainly rural combined authorities. So the other 11 have been born out of core city regions. We haven't been. So we encompass a whole different geography that hasn't been had devolution delivered before. So we can't just look at the population densities. Well, that's the area that deserves to be a strategic combined authority because they've got 2 or 3 or 4 million people. There are plenty more people who are not living in those kind of areas. And if we want to have devolution and show that you can have economic growth, opportunities, skills delivered, the housing that we need, the improved transport connectivity. We can't just focus in on densely populated core cities. We have to show it can be delivered everywhere. And I think that's where we as York and North Yorkshire offer a really unique perspective into government to show that actually if we're going to meet these specific targets of all these areas, we need to do it in a rural and a coastal context. We know that populations of deprivation are heightened in our coastal communities, for example. Again, not something that a lot of the core city regions have to worry about. Heavily rural, like we are. Some areas do obviously have rural areas, but nowhere near on the level of Weed. About 75% of our region is classed as rural, and then within that, even more that is extreme rural. I mean, where there's literally just a church and that's it. There is hardly anything in some of our communities. So we have to show how devolution works and how opportunities can work for everywhere. So it can't be about just the numbers of people. It has to be about the area as a whole. And I think when you look at what we have to offer into government, we have a very unique offering, and that's been shown with developing our growth plans for the next 10 years that government have asked us for. We're the only area that's talking about agriculture, for example, which is a huge part of our economy, hugely important. Food security, particularly with world events, with climate events, it's incredibly important. And we're the area that can really drive and forward that. That wouldn't be a priority for London or for Manchester or Liverpool, who just don't have that geography. And that's not their fault. They just don't have that geography. Whereas they'll lead on other areas that we don't have the same footprint. And that's fine. That's the beauty of devolution. It's very much focused into each unique area, and we can deliver what we need for our area, but also we can really showcase what our strengths are and put that onto a national and international map.
So I think you've said something really, really significant there, which is you pointed out the distinctiveness of each of these combined authorities, the jurisdiction. It's each one has some claim to distinctiveness, doesn't it? The rural nature of much of your patch, if I can put it that way, David, it's really striking, and it sort of speaks to one of the oldest, like the most classic distinction in British politics that I can think of, which is town and country, isn't it? You've got both. Now
Yeah,
that seems to me that's a tall order. Coming up with a strategy, coming up with a plan that's going to satisfy your voters in town and country at the same time. That's going to work just as well for a business owner in Harrogate as it is going to for a farmer, inland from Whitby by 5 miles, and someone who's on the coast right there with a very different set of interests as well. I suppose I'm saying something obvious, really, which is that all of these groups are going to have quite different needs, quite different interests. Does that preoccupy your thoughts as you're making your plans?
It's our geography makes everything so much more challenging. When we're talking about developing skills, for example, how do you deliver a skill strategy to someone who lives in the middle of Dales, who might be nowhere near a college or a training provider? You know, how do we build affordable homes in the middle of the moors or Dales, which is also a national park, for example, so a lot of green belt? How do you improve bus connectivity in the middle of rural North Yorkshire, where the vast majority of people on those buses, you know, are just not going to be using it on a daily basis? Then when you look at things like green book appraisals for big infrastructure projects, most time when you're looking at plans on the coast, they just don't, those numbers just don't add up because you don't have that volume of people. So there are some structural changes that need to happen around policy to make it work. But as ours, yes, it is our biggest challenge, our geography, and how we deliver plans and growth plans for everyone. We are very fortunate in our patch that we have incredible R&D research development around innovation around food, farm and agricultural, digital creatives, a lot of that in and around the city of York. So through the University of York, Aston Bryan College, Ferrer Science Park. So we have that. But then we have the raw nature of our region where we can go and actually implement that innovation and that research development. So there is a lot of crossover where the two really do work well together and really work in hand in glove. And we know, we speak to businesses time and time again who want to relocate or are looking to move into our patch because they want to have their workforce to be able to live in an area like York and North Yorkshire that has beautiful green spaces connected to the outdoors, has that coastal element. Not everybody wants to work in a core city region in a big tower block of offices. So we do have a lot of offering there, but our geography does always make it so much more challenging. But again, that comes back to my previous point. Because it makes it challenging doesn't mean it can only be born out of a city region. We have to showcase how you do it. So when we're delivering our skills package, for example, how do we have more emphasis on learning online, for example, remote learning? How can we take skills offering to people? A big emphasis on how we can have that spoken wheel effect when we're developing business parks. So not everything can be just born out of York Central, which is one of the biggest brownfield development projects going on in the entire country. But how can we have the spoken wheel effect? So how can we have smaller business parks in places like Selby or in Thirsk, Malton, which is something we're developing? So you don't have to travel all the way from those far-reaching areas to come into York or vice versa. So we're always looking at that, how we can develop that and how we have that city approach, but also into that town. But then we always think of like rural, but then you have extreme rural where, you know, they're so far removed from any kind of connectivity. So how do you take it into those places? And again, some of the challenges are those absolute foundations where you've got to improve the bus connectivity. They're actually online connectivity. Some of our communities have no access to the internet, for example. I remember speaking to Andy Burnham quite early on. He was saying that challenges his communities face is the cost of connectivity to the internet. And I was like, my challenge is a lot of my communities don't even have the internet, you know. So actually for us, it's fixing those foundations, which we talk about a lot. So then that spoken wheel, so you can have a little business park in the middle of a rural community because they've got access to those opportunities. Therefore, then people can stay. About 97% of our businesses in our region are small or micro, employing less than sort of 10 or 15 people. So we have this unique makeup of businesses in our region that are scattered all over the place. It's how we can grow our own and keep them here. That's a really big part of what we're driving forward. Is we have so much going on. How do we retain it here? And a lot of that comes back to that skills element of those little employees. How do they just employ that one extra person to grow their business by 3 or 4-fold? And that's kind of where we're looking at, rather than looking at a 15,000 company that employs 10 or 15,000 people. That's not what we do on that scale. We have some, but not on that scale. Ours are the smaller micro stuff who want to be dotted around the region. That's what they tell us. We have to provide the environment where they can keep doing that.
I, that's a fascinating answer. And I mean, you just mentioned Andy Burnham, obviously one of the most high-profile mayors, but also someone who I think is associated not just with the word mayor, but with the word metro. He's from that generation of regional mayors, sub-regional mayors, if you like, who were metro mayors. The model of the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, of all the combined authorities, is still basically templated on that idea of a metropolitan mayoralty. So I guess my question to you, and I hope it's a fair question, to what extent do you have the tools? Do you have the setup around you to work as differently as you're describing, given the specific needs of the people in your area, given the context you're in? Does that mayoral model work the way it should, given the diversity and the rural nature of where you are? Or does it need to change? Is there a wish list emerging over the last year of your work of, I wish this was different, I wish that worked differently, I'm going to ask for a change? Is there anything like that happening?
Yes, some things do need to change. I think obviously we have the white paper, which and that for us that really needs to be tabled through Parliament and really needs to be sort of enshrined in law. So devolution, is a real concrete thing that isn't relying on government change or personnel change. It really is enshrined into everything we do. So we're very fortunate at the minute, that we have a government who are really pressing hard with devolution and with mayors, and we're getting great support on that. But it's making sure that that's instilled through every government department and making sure that it's not siloed. So there are certainly some government departments who have probably come on board with devolution maybe faster than others, and some areas where it's more simpler to work on devolution. For example, housing and transport are kind of the obvious ones where it's much harder to work on, say, educational skills because it's just harder to really devolve more of that. But you're right, it's kind of been born out of Metro Bears, and Andy Burnham is the one you think of, and quite rightly so. He's been around a long time. He's incredibly good at what he does. He's been really helpful to all other mayors. We speak on a very regular basis to understand, but even he will say what we've delivered in Manchester is not what you're going to deliver in York and North Yorkshire. What he's done on transport in terms of franchise and everything, creating the bead network, take it all under control. That model is not necessarily going to be rolled up and implemented in York and North Yorkshire. And there are some, and just go back to previous points, devolution has been born out of core city regions. It's not been born out of a region like mine. So, for example, all other 11 mayors are part of the what is it? City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. And so all the other 11 mayors get a big transport settlement because it's born out of a core city region. We're the only one that don't have that. So we have transport powers, but we have nowhere near the funding that all the other 11 mayors have. So that's things like that need to change because again, devolution was created out of a core city region. Rural areas weren't thought about at the time. So things like that do need to change, and structures do need to change. The biggest structure is actually is that working in isolation, and government departments working that way. As a mayor, you work across all the spectrum. So when we're developing a housing strategy, we link it into our transport because we need to move people around. Then we look at the education offering, the skills offering, what that does in terms of our targets around net zero and improving the environment offering. Governments need to work on that much more as well. And I think that's where having devolution enshrined into law will really help to make sure those government departments are working. So a planning proposal for a housing project doesn't get, stifled because of something else. But if it's an opportunity to build 5,000 homes, it can't be implemented. It can't be hindered because of some transport element. So it's looking at in the whole, which is how combined authorities are set up to work. Government hasn't traditionally been set up to work the same way. So sometimes there's a button of heads, and it's making sure that really is. And I think enshrining devolution in law and getting the white paper through will really help that and really emphasize that. So when there is political change or leadership or personnel, it doesn't go with it because we're too invested and it's delivering too much for it to fall away if a new government comes in or new leadership or a new direction wants to come in. It's too important. It's delivering too much to have that go away that quickly.
I think that's really helpful, and I think you've put your finger on something that's really distinctive as an opportunity from if we can call it an experiment. It's probably too late to call it an experiment in combined authorities and directly elected mayors. But you're right. This is an institution that when it's working well, when it's delivering because it can cut across those barriers that sometimes get artificially or otherwise put up between different areas of public service and different areas of how government ought to work. It can cut across some of those and create new integrations that help to deliver things. I think you put that really compellingly. But it takes me back to something else that we heard in the first one of these sessions. I want to run it by you as well, which is this idea that you're directly elected. That's a distinctive feature of your post. You occupy this strategic position anyone looking at you and looking at your job title will think this person is the directly elected leader of this region, the whole region, and everything to do with it. So there's a kind of a tension here as well, right? There's the set of powers that are kind of innate to a combined authority that are quite tightly defined, I think, actually. I mean, there's going to be more debate over what should happen through this devolution process. You're absolutely right. But then there's public expectation. The average person in the street, if you know, come up to you and say, shake your hand or something and say, okay, David, you know, they're not going to think, oh, this person, you know, it can't help me with my NHS waiting list, or this person can't weigh in on the bins, or whatever it is that's affecting their lives. You are just the figurehead for government in this place. It's a bit like being an MP. An MP can't tell someone to go somewhere else and to sort of say, no, that's not my domain. Sorry, go talk to the council, go talk to the NHS. Are you starting to feel that way? I think there was a sense that Claire Ward was starting to feel that way. I wonder if that's going to become a bit of a theme in this series. Does it seem inevitable to you that mayors are going to need to take on more and more interest and powers and levers to change things that currently just aren't within the scope of the combined authority?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people look to the highest figurehead, don't you? And I think potentially that is the mayor of the region. You know, if you want it or don't want it, it's probably the role that people see. I remember I went to Harrogate and I spoke at a Chamber of Commerce event, and me and my chief exec went over and we spoke for 2 hours on our growth priorities and the money we're spending and the 25 million we're spending to skills and the 100 million we're spending to transport this year and all these kind of stuff and engage with government. And we did this huge spiel and this big PowerPoint presentation thing. And the first question from the audience was, I've got a hedge that's overgrown on my street. How are you going to sort that out? And we were like, we've just laid out this 200 million pound spending pot that we're going to deliver about economic growth and opportunities. And it was still about hedge cutting, you know, and I get it, you know, I get it. And I think it's really important that's where, just going back a couple of questions, where still working with your local authorities is really key, because you need to have that relationship, because fundamentally that's their kind of remit and their realm. But you also don't want to step on their toes and sort of come over as I'm the mayor, I'm dominated, I'm throwing out everything you've done, we're starting again. And we're very much not about that. We are very much about, if something's working and something's delivering, how can we add value to it? How can we support it? For us, how can we link York and North Yorkshire in maybe better? Maybe there's things that York or North Yorkshire delivered that would overlap, particularly around health, for example, which I've just had a call before this about how York and North Yorkshire are looking at health in their both authorities, and how can I be a figurehead and kind of bring it together. So there is a lot of carryover and crossover there. Things like housing is another one where we have a strategic partnership with Homes England and we get brownfield funding. So we kind of bring in the money, but the local authorities are still the deliverers of house building. They're still the deliverers around planning. They're still the ones who've got their local plans. So you have to have those really key relationships. But I think in time we are going to be taking on more responsibility, and we're going to probably need to take on more responsibility, and it needs to be defined. But with that, we also need to get the resources and the funding to go with it. And we can't just be handed here's a whole new criteria, say around health, off you go. You've got to get the resources around it. And that's where, again, as a newer combined authority, we're still in our infancy in terms of creating our organization. So we're still building it. And we're finding that because we don't have, for example, on transport, that long-term settlement, we're having to spend quite a lot of money of the mail investment funds, so kind of my pot of money that I get to spend on the things I want to see. We're having to spend a lot of that on the team on transport just to deliver the basics of transport, because we don't have that long-term settlement. So if we get more responsibility, which I think in time will happen, we need to get the resource and the funding to go with it. We can't just be left to sort of have this bucket and it just all sort of fall away. So that's where those relationships with the local authorities is really key, but really defining what that is as well. So public understand what the difference between I am or the local authority is, or what the MP is. To say a lot of MPs, particularly if you're in opposition, you don't really have much power or say of anything. You can obviously go and campaign and be that voice for your community and go and do that. Absolutely. But you can't really fundamentally change too much in your local area sort of thing. It's really difficult. It's really challenging. I think the job of being a local council and MP is a completely thankless task. It's so challenging, so difficult. Whereas at least as mayors, at least we have some powers and responsibility and some funding to go and do that change. But I think if we get more, we have to get the resources and funding to go with it. And that will be a common message from all mayors, I would imagine. If we are given more powers and responsibility and it's enshrined in law and through the devolution paper, great. But everything has to come with it for us to go and deliver that. That's the key part of it.
I think that's a fascinating answer, and I think you're right. It reflects something I've heard from all sorts of people in combined authority settings, mayors and senior officers and everyone else. You can't have that unfunded mandate. You can't keep handing out responsibility unless you're going to resource it properly. I suppose the integrated settlement is government's big attempt to try and roll that out, right? Give that
Yeah.
flexibility to people. Do you want one of those as soon as possible, or do you want to get on the kind of the high priority list for that as soon as possible, or are
Yeah,
you kind of in the tranche of people who are thinking, make that more meaningful first? I want that to be real fiscal devolution.
yeah. I mean, that's where we want to go. As I say, that we are really confident we can live on that, and we have got a lot of opportunity, we think, in our patch, and having that almost that single pot of money. So much money we get around skills, for example, is so siloed into certain areas. It's really difficult. It's really challenging, and actually just having that single pot of money to go and deliver on your skills strategy, whatever it may be, and is going to be key because again, that's where proper devolution works. We know the challenges our region faces, therefore we know what to prioritise for that funding. And at the minute, not having that does hamper you and restrict you quite heavily because you say you just don't have that flexibility around the money and you don't have that long-term settlement. It's the long-term settlement that's the key because we're talking about things like housing strategy, and if money is a rolling year, how can you long-term build up a portfolio of projects to deliver on the housing needs of your region if money is only going to be for like a single year or for say 2 years? You need to know what housing money you've got over a 10-15 year period, because building houses and the planning and everything is really slow, unfortunately. So you need that long term so you can really get the short term wins, but look at the long term picture. Again, on transport, you need that long term single settlement so you can go invest heavily into transport, because the things you do now is not going to pay fruit straight away, born fruit straight away. It's going to take some time. If we want to go build a new train station or extend the platform or put in a new bus service, even that bus service might not actually really take off for 6 or 12 months. But then if the funding's only for a short period of time, it's not going to have time to really grow. So it's really important to get that long-term funding, whatever guise it's under, but certainly more flexibility about a single pot. I think most combined authority, I'd promise all, I would imagine mayors will be very much supportive on that. And obviously seeing where Manchester going on that with obviously Andy, it's great to see kind of again the first of us to go and deliver on that. What we're very conscious about is being newer to the party. We don't want to be sort of left behind and go, okay, it goes back to being all about city regions again. We've been in place a year now. We've already delivered quite a lot with a new trench of non-core city regions. We need to show devolution can work everywhere, not just in a city. Support us to get there quicker than it has taken other areas to showcase actually devolution does work for everywhere, not just in a core city region.
Yeah, that's going to be the next big challenge, isn't it? Demonstrating that ability. One more quick question, I think, from me, and then I want to go because we've got some really interesting questions coming through on the Q&A function here. So I want to make sure we do them justice. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't reflect on the fact that we are, of course, on election eve here, local election eve. Now, I think look, David, you can tell me off for saying this if you think it's not fair. At the moment, the gang of mayors, if I can put it that way, it's a little bit of a political monoculture. We've only got Ben in the mix there as the only sort of last Tory standing in the mix there. Obviously, you've got your political affiliation. Setting that aside for a moment, it does look like, if the polls are to be believed, if the rumour mill is to be believed, we might have a slightly more politically diverse bunch of mayors in England in 24, 48 hours' time. Setting aside the politics for a second, it's good for the model, isn't it? That means it's mature enough to sustain different political perspectives. Does that mean the model's coming of age? And will it be good for the kind of the visibility and the strength of that Council of Regions and Nations the next time you're all sitting around that table, if you've got different kinds of faces around the table?
I think it's what fundamentally is the most important thing about devolution of mayors is the politics does get put to one side. It is very much about place first, and that's something that you see heavily from Andy and Steve, particularly who have been around for much longer, and something that we've really emphasised. Again, I'm a Labour mayor in a heavy Conservative North Yorkshire, for example. You would never thought that I would have won a year ago, and I think the relationship that I've built with the local authority, with the local MPs, who are still heavily Conservative. Obviously, people like Kevin Hollinray, Rishi Sunak is one of my MPs, for example, who I've not met yet actually. But we have this already, but it comes back to it's very much about place first and actually delivering for your region. And having the relationship is really important with government. However, you have to understand that that the powers and responsibility and engagement you have with government and government departments is really key, especially at the minute where devolution isn't as shrined in law and it's not as hardwired into everything. Building those relationships with government and those government departments is absolutely key. So we have a point of contact in every single government department in my team, so we can go to DEFRA, to DESNES, to whoever, and have those relationships. So the relationship building is key, and putting the politics to one side, as you quite rightly said. And currently it's 11 Labour mayors, and then we've got Ben. Every time that we have engagement, and Ben's always there, and he engages really well. He's a very bright guy. He really gets his region. He's very much fighting for his region. He understands devolution really well, and he has done a lot for his region. And even he would say that the best engagement he's had as being a mayor is in the last 12 months under a Labour government. And with Labour really pushing forward on devolution and putting much more emphasis on mayors, it's really important to have that relationship and to make it about place first over politics. I obviously, as I hope, as a Labour and co-op mayor, that we see more Labour and cooperative mayors, absolutely. And I hope that does happen this week. But it's really making sure that it's always about place first. And that's why what really excited me to the role is it's about supporting your region and making the unique challenges and obstacles, opportunities you have in your patch, really come out. And it's not doing the model that other areas have done. It's very unique to us. If I went down the party route all the time and was like, hard and Labour all the time and just spoke about that, it'd be really difficult for me to function in North Yorkshire, and vice versa. If it was a Conservative mayor in North Yorkshire, it'd be really hard if they went down that route dealing with York. So it really is, you do have to put it aside as much as possible. That said, I am a Labour and co-op mayor, so I'm very supportive of things like having more cooperatives organisations in the patch, for example. That's something that we're really pressing on. So there'll always be those elements of the party, whatever party you are, that you want to push through, because that's why you are a member of that certain party. But we haven't had so much diversity around parties so far, because it's only been Labour and Conservative. If there are other parties coming, it will be interesting to see how it works. I just hope that the work relationship we have stays, and people understand that all that needs to get parked. And if you're going to come in there combative and punchy and all that sort of stuff, it's not going to work, because it's going to fail your people in your patch. If you go in there being punchy and fighting and kicking off, you're just going to fail your region. And if you come in there not to fight for your region, then you're in the wrong job. You don't give up what I've had to give up to do this job is family time, seeing my children, my business, it's so much. It's unbelievable. But I do it because I want to do the best for the people of York and North Yorkshire. Not always about, just party lines. It's about very much that. So any mayor coming in has to have that idea. If not, you're just going to fail really quickly.
I think that's it. You're expressing something I've heard from a few different mayors, which is this idea that it's a kind of a different kind of political role. I think you even said it at the beginning, and it creates incentives to serve your region directly in a way that perhaps no other role does. And that's something that can cut across and even transcend the party politics. So, as you say, an interesting moment to be watching the system from the point of view of someone who gets to observe it with very little skin in the game, David.
I think it's really important that you don't get many opportunities in life to really make a fundamental difference and change. You can talk about it, you can, protest, whatever it may be, but actually go and instigate change. And when you're a mayor, you've got levers to pull, and a lot of time you've got some money. and you can actually go and fundamentally make change. And I know that political landscape of my patch is very mixed, and if I'm going to win again in 4 years, 3 years time, so it's going to be really difficult because of the landscape and politics and all the rest of it. So it's like you need to make sure that you do fundamentally the most you possibly can, because you might only get one opportunity to do it, and actually to make those change. And so much I want to do is really getting those hard to reach areas community. It can't just be about economic growth at any cost. It's got to be good economic growth. It's got to really help people and fundamentally shift the dial on some of the challenges we face in our country, but more so in our patch because of our geography. And I don't want to look back in 3 years' time and go, I didn't really make those changes I wanted to, when I had the leverages and the power and the engagement, the fact that I can almost pick up the phone to Rachel Reeves or to someone on a fairly regular basis and have a conversation. You're never going to get that engagement ever again. So if you don't make the most of it and really put party to one side and make it about your place, you are completely missing what a mayor is there to do. And I think you look at what Andy's done around homelessness or what Kim's done around child poverty, there's some areas that individual mayors are really passionate about, and you can actually go and make a change on that. If you are sometimes an MP or a local councillor, or even sometimes maybe a council leader with the heavy financial restrictions that they have now because of cuts to councils over many last 10 or 15 years, it's even hard for them. But we have an opportunity to actually do that and actually enshrine things in law and change policy. And that comes with a heavy weight of burden and expectation. But if you're not going to do it and you're going to make it about party and just kick off, then you're just wasting everyone's time, quite frankly.
I think that's a great moment to go to the questions we've been having in from the people who've joined us live. Deborah Cadman's joined us, obviously former Chief Exec, Birmingham City Council, former Chief Exec of Westminster, West Midlands Combined Authority. Thank you so much for joining us, Deborah. I hope you're still on. The question here, David, I think it's interesting. You mentioned, David, putting place and communities at the heart of everything you do. So how do you find, are you able to work across the whole system in your area and influence other partners who are not part of your combined authority? Is that something you're finding it possible to do?
Yeah, so something that we created when we came in, and I'm sure all combined authorities have created it, was our economic framework. And it was really kind of 4 core pillars of what we deliver on. So housing, transport, skills, and then I'm also the Police and Fire Crime Commissioner, just to add an extra workload onto my already busy work life. So those kind of the 4 key principles of what we deliver on. And then, so that looked like a circle of those 4 pieces, almost like a pizza. And in the middle of it, we put that healthy, thriving communities and making sure that everything we do comes back to making sure it supports people in our region. So like I touched before, it's not just economic growth, it's good economic growth. So it's making sure it's inclusive growth for all. So when we're delivering our housing strategy, our transport strategy, our skills strategy, make sure it always buys into that healthy, thriving communities and buying into looking after people first. We're getting really good buy-in from that and the engagement we're getting from local authorities and other parties in the region, because they see that as such an imperative for our region. We are quite fortunate in our patch that we don't have, say, huge unemployment, for example, but we do have an aging population and we have a lot of young people leaving our region because they see opportunities elsewhere. Our job is to really actually how we shift the dial on that, so we can have an aging population who can age here well, but we keep younger people here as well. And that's something that local authorities want. That's what local businesses want, because they want the next generation of workforce being here. It's what we want our entrepreneurs to be here. So it kind of buys through everything we're doing, and we are getting a lot of buying for that, and particularly from industry and business, who you might not necessarily always maybe think of. They put that at the heart, but they understand that they need to have the next generation of workforce here. So, and our colleges, our universities, our schools really buying into it. So we're getting really good buy-in from what we're trying to do. And I think because we're not making it about almost just numbers on a spreadsheet of economic numbers and this, that, and the other, we're really making it about people, and really people buy into people. They want to see that. And so when we put that framework out, and I put that out, and then we created my mayor's vision, and we really emphasize that healthy, thriving communities piece again. We set our stall out to people and say, this is what we're looking to deliver on. We're not going to sort of we're not sort of going to hide away what we're trying to deliver on. This is where we are. We want you to buy in. And we've had huge amount of engagement from particularly stakeholders in our region as well, because government asked all CAs to put their growth plans together for the next 10 years. And that was again where we worked really close with the two local authorities, but again with our universities, our big businesses, our stakeholders, our organizations, because they're the ones who understand it. They understand it, understand what the economic model is out there, what's going on. So we got their buy-in. So we've had really good engagement and buy-in, which has been key for us in our region and in other areas such as the West Mids, because of the geography again that the West Mids have to do. It's a big area and it's very,
Mm.
it can be at times very dispersed. So how you get that engagement is really key. So people feel like they're buying into the combined authority as well. That's really important, that it's not just another level of bureaucracy that's been put onto people in the region. How we engage with people so they come on board, so they feel a part of it. So when we're delivering these plans, they can see their fingerprints all over it. I think it's really important.
So interesting point, and I think a connected question here from Mark Livesey, who says, "Great to see a business leader taking the mayoral role. Quite right to talk a lot about working with local authorities and elected leaders, but I'm keen to hear how you bake the local business perspective into your thinking." It's a sort of a question about your personal style. Are you using your lens, your experience from being a business leader? Is it shaping the way you do this role, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I touched on the start, it's more like it feels like I am running my business. It feels like York and North Yorkshire is almost like my shop, my business, and my job is the stakeholder to bring the right people in. I'm not an expert in net zero or delivering a transport strategy, but you get those right people in. And I think what you do as a business owner is, first of all, you understanding that you're not always the cleverest person in the room, and you just accept that because that's the best way to be, and you get the right people in. But you work across those silos and you go, if we deliver a better transport strategy, that's going to have a knock-on effect on where we can deliver homes. Therefore, that's going to have a knock-on effect on keeping young people there because we can emphasize the affordability. Therefore, that's going to grow our economy because we're going to have the next generation of workforce coming through. So it's piecing it all together. And I think that's the job of a mayor, and what I've always done in my business. I would get a designer in to come and design the clothes we were creating. I would get a photographer to come and do the photography. I would get a web developer to develop the web. It's like I would get an accountant to do the accounts. You bring those people in to create the organization, then let the people go off and run with it. But you keep sort of making sure that everyone's kind of in place and working like that and that collectively. In terms of, and then we've sort of really bought into making sure the business community is really bought into combined authority. So we've created a business board which has got 13 representations on it, and that's from all different business sectors, but also a geographical spread. So we've identified 7 or 8 of the core sectors in our region, so agriculture, rail tech, creatives, a few others, and we've created this business board where they all sit round it, and it's chaired by somebody separate from me as well. We've also got representation from colleges, FEs and HEs, and we've also got representation from the VCSE sector as well on there. So we have that broad spectrum of when we are developing our business plan, we're going down and sitting with 13 business people and colleges and training providers and the university and the VCSE sector to say, how does this look to you? What can you put into this? What are the challenges you're facing in your industry that we can feed into this? And so very much having that open door. We're not a combined authority that's shut off in an ivory tower that's delivering this. It's open up, and having that business board and that business engagement has been really good for us. Plus, it's also really good messaging to government to say that we are private and public sector working hand in glove here to really deliver this for York and North Yorkshire. It's not just another layer of bureaucracy coming in and trying to force things on. It's coming from the businesses. It's coming from local authorities to say, this is what we want from York and North Yorkshire. And then me as the figurehead, or however you want to view it, I then go to government and say, this is all come from the ground up and this is what our region wants to see. And it's come from people like McCain's and Nestle and really big businesses. It's come from University of York. It's come from these places. So we know there's really good buy-in from it and evidence and some real punch behind it.
It's that I think that convening powers becomes really important with questions like that, doesn't it? Slightly different tack. One of the people watching along asked. Well, they asked about 12 questions in one here. I'm going to go for the one at the top, which because I think it speaks to the point we just had a quick discussion earlier about scale, didn't we? The population size, the reach, the strategic capability at that footprint. Well, he brings up, or she brings up, how important is collaboration with South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, other strategic authorities? Is that working well enough informally? I know that you've formalised that I forgot what it's called, the White Rose Convention. What's it?
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
The
so
alliance, what was it?
yeah. So me, Oliver, and Tracy created the White Rose Pact, and we
That's
did
it.
that.
That's it.
We spoke about it really early on, actually, and really, I think it was born out of a few things. It was understanding that borders in a lot of time need to be really porous, particularly around transport. So in York, for example, where I'm sat right now, a lot of our workforce travel to and from Leeds, for example, into West Yorkshire. A lot of people from Selby in my parts travel to Doncaster, into South Yorkshire, and up into the northeast. A lot of people from, say, Scarborough, Whitby, go to James Cook Hospital as a classic example. So our borders are really porous, particularly when it comes to a couple of things like transport. And so, how can we work collectively on that? And we saw the real strength of the Northwest and Andy and Steve is because they've worked together really strongly, particularly around transport, and they've really set this picture up as the Northwest is like the place outside of London to go and do business. And quite right, they've done amazing with it, and the two fantastic mayors who really know what they're doing. But they've really worked together and harnessed it. They've not made it about Greater Manchester or Liverpool. They've made it about the Northwest. And actually, now what Andy and Steve talk about a lot is actually about the North in general. I think that's what all Northern mayors are really starting to talk about now, is actually investment in the North is good for the entire country, and the North's been left behind. So it's that real big growth. Yeah. But me, Oliver, and Tracy have worked really closely on quite a few things. Probably not always in the most like sort of official sense, just having chats and discussions. A lot of time about what it's like to be a mayor, quite frankly, and this, that, and the other. But actually now having some things really, really written in stone. That actually down we're going to work collectively on this. So then we as three mayors and whoever comes in Hull in East Yorkshire next week, and we'll obviously invite that mayor, and I do hope it's Margaret. We'll invite them into it as well to have that collection of four mayors that we can go to government and say we're now speaking on the whole of Yorkshire. And to your point earlier on, is York and North Yorkshire standalone big enough to be a combined authority? 850,000 population. If I go on an international trade visit to say India, are they going to care about 800,000 people? Probably not. We're not big enough on that scale. But if we go on Yorkshire representing 4.5 million people, a geographical area bigger than Scotland, that's going to get some real buy-in, and that's going to get some real punch. And then what delivers something then in West or South Yorkshire is going to have a carry on from what I do in North Yorkshire, and the links into Hull and East Yorkshire, for example, with the Humber and the coastline, what we want to do around net zero and the projects there. That's really key working relationship there as well. But also other areas being trailblazers and really delivering on stuff in more sort of local areas. So if we can really deliver on agriculture and improving that food security, again, like I said, someone like Sadiq or Steve or Andy aren't going to be pressing on that as hard because it's not in their natural environment. But we can really press on that, and that could then be a rolled out strategy or plan or policy for the entire country, as what Steve will do with like offshore wind or tide or whatever it may be. So there's opportunities there to have that collective working, and it does work really well at the minute. It has worked really well. I think that convening again of just more might behind you really does help.
Thank you. I think that's a fascinating answer. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I want to squeeze in one last question myself, and I think we can get in at least two more quick fire questions from the audience here. Are you with me on that, David? So
Yeah, go for it.
Mark Sanford, local government researcher extraordinaire, is on the call. Brilliant to have you with us, Mark. And he asks about, unusually, you're the PCC and the fire commissioner in your role as well. Do you find that those parts of your role take up a lot of your time and energy, given that you're still sort of pulling your team together for things like transport?
Yeah, I think I was the first mayor to have it all in one go at the start, so that was a new challenge. I have Joe Coles, who leads on the OPFC side of things for me. What it's been really good actually is it's really brought the two areas together, the Office of Police Fire Crime, because so much we want to do there about early intervention and prevention work, particularly of our young people, about how just because you're born into a certain environment, that doesn't mean that that's who you are. You can, if this environment doesn't support you. So how we can bring like a skills agenda in to support those people before they fall off the tracks, for example, when we're delivering a housing strategy, making sure that it's supporting people as well in those hard to reach areas. So it does a lot of carryover. There's a lot of to and fro. It's interesting. One of the things we first did was I created a Mayor's High Street Fund to invest £10 million into our high streets. And I went and we were talking to high street groups and organizations and business improvement districts. And I was thinking it's going to be loads of conversations about investment in this business or this business or this business. And actually, so much of it was actually about antisocial behavior, retail crime, and all that element. So we've managed to actually put some funding together and actually working closely with the police to actually come up with a retail crime strategy, which is not only going to support our businesses and then be more profitable, but also it's going to support that crime element. So it is a challenge because again, it's a big geographical remit and delivering on police and fire in our geography is really difficult. But there's
Mm.
so much crossover and carryover that we can actually develop, say, skills or a housing strategy or transport strategy that also supports creating safer communities and safer people and giving people opportunities rather than just falling off the tracks and just being the next cycle of people who fall into crime. So it's difficult, but I think it's so much more opportunity and actually so many areas where we can link the two together. So it's really opened our eyes in the combined authorities to actually how we can tackle some of our really challenging areas and different challenging propositions we have with using non-police. You don't always want a police officer going into a community. Sometimes having someone from the CA coming in with like a skills strategy or an opportunity strategy works actually better in some cases. So I think overall it's been much more positive, but it does add a lot of workload. Yeah, I won't lie.
No, I can imagine. And I was about to say your big geography, your rural setting, as it were, that must make that side of the role much more complex. Right. I think we've got 2 minutes left on the clock. I want to squeeze in the question I'm sort of asking everyone at the end of these meetings with mayors, if that's all right with you, David. We're expecting, starting from tomorrow, to have a lot more directly elected mayors around the country soon. So I'm asking each mayor, what's your big piece of advice for someone who might want to themselves become a mayor? What do you wish you'd known when you were just getting started?
What did I wish I'd known? I think I think early on, I think for me early on, because we were creating a new combined authority out of scratch, and if you look at CAs coming on now, they're going to be in that position as well. I think first and foremost is set out what you want to do and really stick to that. Have your vision, have your plan, have your goals, because you can get into everything. And I think that's kind of just for the point early on. You can spread yourself too thin and try deliver on everything. Have those key areas that you really want to deliver on. So for me, we're talking about housing. It's the affordability and social element of housing, how housing delivers for the people of my patch. So it's making sure that you're really set clear on what you want to deliver on and really drive that, but also bring your unique perspective and personality and thing for it. Say, being a business owner, being a dad of two young children, having experience of education, a brother as a police officer, bring that through and really talk on that and have that human element and make sure it's about your region and it's about the people that you are representing. Don't get sort of brought up too much into the big picture stuff, really focusing on your area. And I'd say to flip it slightly, to talk to any chief execs or anyone in new combat authorities coming through, stay away from this idea of being like a CA light, a small combined authority, that kind of one that just filters things through. You've got to resource your team because as you go on, as you take on transport responsibility, housing, skills, everything like this, you need the resource and you need the people to go and deliver it. What we've got to deliver on skills this year, for example, is about 25 million pounds, I think, in skills funding we've got going out the door this year. We've got 3 people who work on skills in our CA. Our transport team is currently 3 people. So we are really small. So we're having to deliver a devolution deal that we got signed off 2 years ago under a different government who didn't have much emphasis on it. Now devolution's ramped up tenfold since I came in post, but our structure is still aligned to what it was 2 years ago. And if you're a new CA coming on, or a new mayor, or a new chief executive in those roles, stay away from that idea. We're going to be that small and nimble. You need people, you need the bodies around the table who can go deliver it. Because if not, you won't be able to. And when funding comes at the drop of a hat, when government come call and say we've got a trailblazer of £10 million, you need to have a plan delivered in the next 6 weeks to go and deliver it. If you've got one person working on it, you're going to fail. So get the right team in place, but really back yourself and just bring your own personality through it and just be yourself, basically. Yeah.
I mean, you gave a lot of advice there. I think that's really lovely. Thank you. And I think you're right about that capacity point. I don't think the average person considers just how small, how tight, nimble, I suppose, is the nice way of saying it, some combined authority teams are. but we've taken up a lot of your time already, David. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Pleasure.
For everyone listening and everyone watching online, our next event is going to be with Mayor Richard Parker of the West Midlands Combined Authority, and that's in a couple of weeks' time. Do look us up online. If you type reimagining the local state into Google, I think that'll get you where you want to go. But until next time, thank you so much, David, and thank you all for joining us today. Do take care.
Thank you very much.